Hi, I'm Melissa Ushakov from the Access team, and I'm here with Jeremy. And we've been talking about the concept of having an instance group, specifically to help with propagating settings across an entire instance or more than one group. And we've been talking about basically what that would look like and discussing some of the challenges that we may encounter with an approach like that. So I'm going to share my screen where I have a document where I'm walking through some of it. All right, so like I mentioned before, that we have a challenge today where we have some settings that only exist at the instance level, and we don't really have a good way to propagate those settings, basically make them available for group administrators. And we've been talking about having an instance level group, but that has some consequences that we'll walk through. And when we take a step back and think about, okay, what are we trying to solve? Really what it is how can we have a better way to manage settings at scale, right? Across all groups in an instance, certain segments of groups. And I believe that solving that problem without introducing a group, an instance level group will have a better outcome for our customers.
Melissa, let me stop you there. So I think I agree with what you just said, which is we want to make settings more accessible and easier to manage and not rely on like instance level functionality in order to make that happen for our users. But I think there are other themes as well that we've touched on, one of which is engineering efficiency, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
One, that was a big motivating factor behind instance groups, the instance group. Number two was like GitLab.com parity. It's like we want to make sure that like we're building these things in a way that .com users can benefit from versus just only self-managed users when we stuff in the admin panel. If you wouldn't mind, like let's see if we can touch on those themes as well, like as we go, because I think that
Mm-hmm.
there was a little bit more behind the why we're going in this direction than just settings propagation.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, today engineering teams and product teams basically have to build a setting 3 times. Once at the instance level, once at the group level, and once at the project level if they want to make that accessible basically at all levels. And the side effect of building things at the instance level is that GitLab.com groups don't have access to that setting. And historically, just because of the need and where GitLab came from, there are a lot of settings today that exist at the instance level. And we have basically given the product team guidance that moving forward, settings should be set, basically built at the group level. But the side effect from that is that now instance admins don't have a way to enforce a single setting across all groups. So that's sort of the side effect of building settings at the group level.
Cool. So talk to me through again. Talk to me through the idea of like an instance group, and then why we feel like that is not the right direction versus moving towards what you just kind of proposed, which is a recommendation of you know introducing settings at the group level and providing some management mechanism across like groups so you can manage your settings across a set of groups, even if that's like all groups in an instance. You're essentially applying like a setting to the entire instance. But I'm really curious about why the instance group concept is something you're moving away from.
Yeah, so when I think about basically a sequence of steps, right, that would need to happen, um, if we're relying on a group as the primary mechanism of and basically having a setting and propagating it down, the kind of hidden assumption there is that self-managed instances would also need to have basically a group that exists across the whole instance, right? Um, and to take a step back, to take advantage of this, the first step would be to move settings to the group level, right? Because if we're with an instance level group saying, groups are the way that you implement settings, and then we have this group that rules them all, right? That basically every group in an instance is under this instance group. So the first step is move settings to the group level. Then we would create a group that's basically a parent, right, for any group that's creating an instance. And when we do that, there's a lot of functionality that comes with groups that may or may not be um, a good experience or not, right? For example, members. When you have a group and then subgroups within it, any member of the group, of the parent group, top level group, is inherited down. So for GitLab.com specifically, if we added anybody to this top level root group, then they would be visible throughout, and that could be unexpected. And also, we take this approach, if we want anyone to manage instance level, I'll call it features, right? Toggles that apply across the whole thing, we would have to have people in that group. So then those people would be visible basically on the members list throughout. We could have special logic to hide them, right? But that is going to be sort of special logic that we would need to build for this purpose only.
Cool. So if I can summarize kind of what you said is that it's possible to be able to create an instance group, but it's going to be technically challenging because there are going to be a number of like edge cases that we're going to have to work around. And the example you just gave is membership inheritance, because you have a group and then those members get inherited down in every subgroup. And so we'd have to change a pretty fundamental way for that specific group that would A, be challenging to work around, and B, possibly counteract any engineering efficiencies that we get from introducing this instance group. And two, the thing that we're going to have to do anyway is move settings to the group level anyway. So what I heard was that let's just start there anyway, and allow users to manage settings at the group level, and we get a lot of the value and solve that GitLab.com problem. Was that about right?
Yes, basically, basically this approach or the approach of mass settings management, the first step is always to move settings down to the group level. And that's something that we can do today across, basically, it would have to be across product groups, right? And just start slowly moving settings from the admin panel to the group level and allowing group administrators to change those. So that's a no regrets move, right? We need to do that anyway.
Cool.
Some other edge cases that are detailed in the document are around changing the path, right, for all groups, right? So if we introduce a root group, we would need to do a migration, right? Change the path for all groups, or we would need to have special logic. We also depend throughout GitLab today on the designation of whether a group is top level or not for things like billing and different settings that apply. So we would need to work around that or change that logic because what are top level groups today won't be top level groups anymore under the concept of a root group existing.
Cool. So can we revisit the problems that we wanted to solve? So let's just go down in order. So we introduced and we proposed the instance group because we wanted to get engineering efficiency, like removing the need, as you said, to like introduce a setting at 3 different levels. Number 2, we wanted to get to GitLab.com parity. And number 3, we wanted to make settings management a lot easier. Can you talk to each one of those and then talk about, instance group versus this approach? Like what is the trade-off here?
Yeah, so for GitLab.com parity and making settings accessible, really that comes from moving settings down to the group level, right? That doesn't really come from whether you do an instance group or something else. Really, the way that you make those settings accessible is moving them to the group level. Where the ease of management comes in, basically, and to kind of take a step back, I've heard this problem be expressed by customers, not just from the GitLab.com versus self-managed angle. I've also heard it from basically they want to enforce settings from the top level group down right? There's basically this theme of settings management. It's not just instance versus group versus project, right? It's basically how do you cascade things down. So I think with an instance group, we could solve the problem of settings management, but there would be a significant amount of edge cases to consider, right? By virtue of having a group be the way that you achieve that. Because today groups aren't just a collection of settings. There's a lot more components to it that we would need to work around, consider. So I believe that a lot of the efficiency gains, there's basically a big upfront cost of working around that. And even beyond that, if this is the path that we take for self-managed instances, we don't have a great way to enforce the existence of this group today, right? Once someone has an instance, they can today do anything with it. So it would be tricky to basically rely on the existence of a group for settings management for self-managed instances.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So here's my understanding based off of what you've told me and my own understanding of of each of those three areas. Number one, engineering efficiency. Yes, if that is the most important thing to the organization and to us here, then an instance group does make some sense because it does remove the need to build just about anything at the instance level. Is that valuable? Yes. Is it valuable enough to warrant a instance group? In your opinion, no. Um, what what we've also talked about is that we think that we will always need an admin panel, right? Like we will extract things iteratively from the admin panel and introduce it at the group level so that .com users can use them. But there will always be a need for some type of admin panel so you can manage things like users, where an admin needs to see a comprehensive list of like everyone in the instance and be able to manage them. So there will always be some admin panel that is necessary in this world. The other is GitLab.com parity, which the idea of an instance group itself does not solve this problem or help us in any way. What does is the idea of introducing settings at the group level and allowing those to be inherited into groups beneath it, which does not require an instance group. Instance group comes with all of these other technical challenges that we will need to solve. But the GitLab.com parity problem is solved by the introduction of settings at the group level, not by the introduction specifically of an instance group. Because if you have an instance level group and just have that in a vacuum, then you have the same problem that we do today with GitLab.com, because only certain users will have access to that instance level group, since we cannot grant just anyone on GitLab.com access to that. The last part is settings management, which I think is we can handle more elegantly with an instance level group, actually, where the fact is that an instance level group, you can just set things at that group, and then rest easy knowing that those settings are going to get propagated down across everyone on everything in the instance. So what we've identified as probably the biggest area of biggest challenge for us to consider is how do we manage group settings across an entire instance without introducing or relying on an admin panel for you to do that. I think that there's some exploration. I think that's a tractable problem. I think we can solve that. But so in my mind, if settings management and engineering efficiency is the most important thing to you with a bullet, then I think that instance group has some viability. But in my mind, the most important thing for us to close is the GitLab.com gap, and close it as quickly as we possibly can to allow people who are paying for GitLab.com the ability to manage these important settings that are currently stuck in the admin panel and they have no access to. They don't have any, without any concept of like group administration. That's a gap I think needs to be closed urgently. Would you agree or disagree with anything I just said there?
No, I agree. And like you said, I agree that the most important problem is the GitLab.com parity, and that's solved by moving features down to the group level. And we don't need a group, an instance group for to solve that, right? Is just moving settings down.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for the conversation. That hopefully that was clarifying for me. But yeah, I think that the approach makes sense to me, and I think it is a more iterative path. I know Access is working on a lot of different things, and I can definitely see a more iterative path to customer value if we start pulling things out of the group, out of the admin panel and onto the group level. So yeah, excited to work with you on that. Awesome. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks.